Okay, I'm talking to Emmett Miller, MD, a longtime friend and colleague who has volunteered to share his story of encountering male postpartum abandonment syndrome, and a rather unusual twist. And firstly, Emmett, can you describe, I know you had three children, what the history was with your first two sons?
Yeah, well, I was married while I was still in college. Bad move. That son from that marriage is now 50 years old. We separated when he was several years old. And my second son is now 37. And that marriage was also rather brief. And my daughter is 30 years old, and that marriage is still flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah. Now, what's the secret? What did you do differently in this marriage?
Well,
and first of all, describe what you encountered. I know there were some problems when your daughter was about 2, and describe that, and then how you dealt with it.
well, I didn't have sufficiently good bonding with the first two children.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, I was in medical school at the time and really didn't, quotes, have the time to connect. And there were some physical limitations with the second child. And although our bonding was much, much better, still it left quite a bit to be desired. By this time, I had worked with so many adults who had had varying degrees of bonding with their parents and with their children. So I had a much clearer idea of what kind of world I wanted to create for my daughter and what kind of relationship I wanted between us.
Mm-hmm.
And also I'd become much, much better at understanding what kind of person would be able to survive living with me. And so I made a much better choice of a wife.
Mm-hmm.
So we had quite a positive set of bonding experiences from pre-birth right on through until when our daughter was at about the age of 2. My wife's childhood abuse issues started to appear, particularly abuses at the hands of her father of a sexual nature.
Mm-hmm.
This was her first child, and as her child reached the age of 2, she began to have some emotional problems and some flashbacks. She went into therapy, but still it had an impact on the closeness of our relationship,
Yeah.
which had been stellar up until that point.
And then, how did you respond to that, and what, and both, did it re-stimulate any abandonment on your part? I know you didn't have a very close connection with your father, and then how did you guys move through that and reestablish the wonderful relationship you have?
Well, fortunately, by the time that happened, I had been working for about 10 years in my practice with women who had been sexually molested as children. So I had a pretty good idea of what I was in for. I knew that it was possible to make it through it for the woman, and I knew that a relationship could make it through it, so I had faith.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say in my earlier experiences, I really didn't have faith that we could really make it through the issues that were there. But now I have faith. Physically and emotionally, it was pretty hard.
Sure.
Because there had been already now several other times in which I had made what I thought was a lifelong commitment to someone, and it didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that sort of, and here we go again, feeling that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, I had a different set of thoughts up here and a different understanding. So it meant kind of staying faithful to what our beliefs were. When we got married, by the time we got married, both of us were fairly mature people. So it wasn't till death do us part. Our marriage vows were, my marriage vow to her was that I would support her and love her as she continued her personal development, and in the hopes that this would bring us closer together. And that was hers to me as well. Mm-hmm. And so it was our promise, if somebody has to go through something, the other person's going to stick with them. Mm-hmm. And so I stuck with her while she went through it. And, she did the same with me as I was going through some of my stuff, and it paid off big time.
Great.
So I would say it was several years of things being a little difficult. Our physical relationship was seriously hampered at that time because, mm-hmm. In her unconscious mind, I began to become her father.
Sure.
And when I would say things in a normal tone of voice, she would hear her father's tone of voice. And,
mm-hmm.
Her father would do things like kick her and things like that. That was one of his forms of discipline, was to kick.
Mm.
So that if I were to reach over and tickle her with my toe or something like that, she would accuse me of kicking her.
Yeah.
It was those kinds of things
Triggers.
were happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that it was my really understanding of the whole process that enabled me to stick it out. Without that understanding, I don't think I would have made it through.
Great. Yeah. Now, besides working with clients, were there any particular things that you did for your own inner growth? I've done countless things, and some were great, some were not so great. Any that you want to put a plug for?
Yeah, as you know, my main goal was to discover what the healing process really is.
Mm-hmm.
I had realized that by the use of hypnosis and guided imagery and meditation, we could create amazing changes in people's health. So there was some way in which people related to themselves and the world that seemed to provide the maximum healing ability, whether it was emotional or mental or physical issues. Mm. And I had become aware of the fact that what was needed was a quality of love. And so I began to realize that really it was love that was at the basis of it. And by love, I mean the force of holding together. And I mean the force that holds two carbon atoms together because they share an electron. It's the notion of sharing, and we own this together so we don't polarize, or how multicellular animals, how the cells stay together and work together, mm-hmm. or how a mother and child, or mother and father and child can hold together as a unit, or a family as a unit, or a community as a unit. All of them, in my mind, are forms of a fundamental force that I call love, and it has to do with holding on. It has to do with keeping together and staying in connection. Mm-hmm. And so it was my commitment to that connection. I also, having had several other relationship failures, the fantasy that, that pretty girl over there is going to be the one who's going to save me. This one's going to work out. No, this one's going to work out. No, that's not what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of held on to that and said, okay, it's my duty to continue to love, even if we don't have the outward signs of affection that one would want to have, and even though there's not that deep feeling of safety and comfort and acceptance that I had found in our relationship, still it was worth hanging in there and doing my part. Mm. And the bonding with our child was still incredibly strong, and so it was really worthwhile to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
There was nowhere else that I needed to go.
Yeah.
And I went to my favorite addiction, which was work, and it got me through a lot of it. I did a lot of writing and created a lot of guided imagery cassettes, as they were in those days, and that kind of kept me busy.
And did you listen to your own cassettes? Was that part of your healing?
Occasionally, but I listen to them. I just hear the mistakes. I mean, they were great, but I should have said it this way. Oh, could have done it that way. Why didn't I lower my voice a little at that point? Oh, I can't believe I chose that particular piece of music.
Well, they're wonderful tapes, and I've certainly played an important part in my life. So, well, this is just what I wanted to hear, Emmett. Thank you. I'm very pleased. So I'm sure your story will be useful to many other fathers and potential fathers. Thank you.
Well, I commend you on the excellent work that you're doing, and I hope you continue to do it. A father as a continuous loving force in the life of a child or a mother is of inestimable value, as I can say from my experience now, some 30 years after having done that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Be well.
Okay, Doc.